Valorant is a game of strategy. One of the most pivotal elements in this is predicting the enemy. Where to stack, when to rotate. This is my way of predicting the enemy. What's up guys, I'm Randall. This video is talking about predicting the enemy based on their team composition. When the agent select screen loads in, that's your first piece of information. Before the first round even starts, you should already know what tools both teams have. In lower elo, teams almost never run perfect side executes. A lot of the round feels chaotic, but even in that chaos, compositions still tell a story. Let's use bind B site as an example. B site has two main ways attackers scale in, B long and hookah. And those two areas require completely different utility to clear out for attackers. Hookah is close range, with tight angles making it a shotgun's playground. To scale in hookah safely, you need some kind of drone or info clearing utility, like Array's Boombot or Euro. Without something to clear those close corners, walking into hookah is really just gambling. Now compare that to B long. B long is obviously longer range. Defenders will usually be fighting guard and maybe playing around the TP to take that space safely. You usually want to use some form of a pop flash, whether that be Sky or Phoenix. Even Reyna can help, but her flash is weaker at close range because it is a near sight. So it's not always ideal for B long. So here's the prediction. If the attacker's team doesn't have drone utility, hookah becomes really risky for them. If they don't have strong flashes, B long becomes harder to fight. You look at their comp and ask yourself, where are they actually strongest? Then you prioritize defending the area they are weakest at so that you have multiple areas to retake that site. And this doesn't just apply to site hits. Think about flanks. In bronze and below, if a team doesn't have a sentinel actively watching the flank with some form of util, or if they're doing it themselves, they usually aren't thinking about it. Even if they have a deadlock, most players at that elo aren't using her utility properly. So if they don't have a reliable flank control, shift walking can give you insane timing windows. Because you're not just playing the round, you're playing the composition. Now flip it, because prediction isn't just for attackers. The same logic applies to defense. If you're holding hookah on bind, scanning utility is insanely valuable. Clearing hookah or B short without information is really dangerous. You're exposing yourselves to multiple angles at once that they can be playing from. That's why agents like KO or Sova are really strong on this site, because they have that utility to clear angles without having to physically be there. Instead of drive peeking into three people, you scan first. You force them to either shoot the utility or get revealed. And that changes how you predict the round. If your team has scanning utility, you can play more patiently. You don't need to gamble stack as hard. You can hold deeper angles and react. Now think about long control as a defender. B long is hard to hold without smokes or flashes. If you have a controller who can smoke at the entrance to long near fountain, or a flash agent like Euro who can fight for early space, you can contest long, fall back safely, and even re-clear it later. But if your comp doesn't have those tools, trying to fight long aggressively becomes way riskier. So again, it comes back to composition. If your team lacks initiator utility, hookah becomes scarier to hold. If you lack smokes or flashes, long becomes harder to hold. Prediction isn't just about guessing what they'll do. It's about understanding what both teams are capable of doing safely. And once you understand that, you stop playing random. You start playing probability. Let's simplify everything we just talked about. Long and angles as attackers, pop flash. Long angles as defenders, pop, flash, and smokes. Close angles as attackers, drone. Close angles as defenders, initiator utility, or sentinel setup. That's the foundation. Now apply that logic to the entire map. Continuing to use bind, when you load in, you're not just thinking about one choke point. You're thinking about how their composition interacts with each part of the map. And prediction doesn't stop at where are they strong. It extends to when should we rotate? Where should we stack? How does their economy change their options? Let's talk about the economy first. If the attackers are on a low buy, pistols, shields, shotguns, maybe some light armor, they're way more likely to play close angles. On bind, that usually means hookah or a short. These tight spaces where long-range rifles doesn't matter as much, and running gun is still very, very prominent, even on full buys. So if they're broke, you can predict closer contact. Now here's how I categorize enemy compositions. There are 5 main utility types you should immediately identify in Agent Select. Flash, flank watch, smokes, dive, and drones. When you break a composition into those 5 categories, predicting rotations becomes much easier. For example, no drone, no flash, they will struggle to stay out into tight spaces or clear stacked angles. No flank watch, late round flanks become extremely high value. No dive, executes will be slower and more default heavy. No smokes, they can't isolate angles, so stacking one site and rotating to the other and playing for retake becomes so much stronger. Now let's bring it back to defending. If the enemy has strong dives, good flashes, full rifles, you can expect fast pressure somewhat early. If they have no dive, or weaker entry, or even a lower economy, you can lean towards slower, closer, more contact-heavy plays. So instead of randomly rotating when you hear one piece of utility, you rotate based on probability. You stack based on composition. You hold based on what they can actually execute effectively. That's how you turn Agent Select into round-winning information. Now let's use this to outthink the enemy together.